Hello everyone! In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to conduct RFM analysis with customer purchase history data in Excel. RFM analysis is a classification method for customer targeting. In RFM analysis, customers are divided into several groups based on the RFM conjectures. The group customers who have a high recency score, that is, who made transactions more recently, are expected to purchase more and spend more. And those who have a high frequency score, that is, who made transactions more times, are expected to purchase more and spend more. And customers who have a high monetary value score, that is, who made larger transactions, are expected to purchase more and spend more. So, if the conjectures are true, targeting the customers with high RFM scores makes a marketing activity more efficient. A holdout validation allows us to test such conjectures. A holdout validation is a technique where we divide the data into two different time periods, calibration period and validation period, and make predictions based on the conjectures we want to test using the calibration period and confirm the conjectures by comparing the predictions to the actual data in the validation period. So we are going to divide customers into several groups based on their RFM scores computed in the calibration period. The conjectures expect a high RFM score group would purchase more and spend more than a low RFM score group. Therefore, if the conjectures are true, it will be found that a high RFM score group actually purchased more and spent more than a low RFM score group during their validation period. In addition, by investigating by which metric the high-value customers are well predicted, we can find the best order of RFM metrics for classification. If a recency is more critical than frequency, high recency but low frequency group would purchase more and spend more than low recency but high frequency group during the validation period. If not, it will be found that low recency but high frequency group actually purchased more and spent more during the validation period. So in this video, I'm going to show first how to compute RFM metrics of each customer. Second, how to classify the customers by the RFM metrics. Third, how to validate the customer classification with real data. And this is the data set, the cdnow data set, and you can download the data file cdnow_rfm_clean.excel from our website. And the data file has 4 variables of about 2,300 customers, and the ID variable is an identifier of each customer, and date variable indicates the date when each transaction was made, and the spend variable indicates the net spending made in each transaction, and the period variable indicates if the transaction was the first ever purchase, or a purchase made in calibration period, or a purchase made in validation period. For example, let me interpret several transactions in the data. In the first transaction, the first customer made the transaction on January 1st, 1997, and the net spending was about $30. And because this is the first ever transaction of the first customer in this data set, so this is classified as the first purchase. And the second transaction of this customer was made on January 18, 1997, and the net spending is also about $30, and this is in the calibration period. Please recall the entire time period of this data set I mentioned in our lecture video. The range of the entire data is from January 1st, 1997 to June 30th, 1998. So the midpoint is October 1st, 1997. And this transaction date is before the midpoint. So this transaction is classified as calibration period. And the next transaction is also in the calibration period, which was on August 2nd, 1997. And the net spending is about $15. And the fourth transaction, which was made on December 12th, 1997, which is after the midpoint. So this transaction is classified as validation period. So we are going to use only the calibration period to classify the customer, and we are going to validate this classification using the data in validation period. We are going to exclude the first ever purchases because customers usually make a much larger purchases in the very first shopping trip to the new store. So it is possible that inclusion of first transactions may distort the actual customer purchase patterns. And another reason is that there are some customers who just visited this store only once, like this third customer and fourth customer and fifth customer. They just visited this store only once, and they are highly likely inactive now, so inclusion of those one-time visitors may distort the purchase patterns of the other customers. So we exclude those first transaction data in analysis. And during the lab, please carefully read the questions in the lab material and place your answers to the questions in the Word answer sheet file. And after the lab, please submit both your Excel spreadsheet and answer sheet file to our course website. Before getting started, let me talk about the copyright of the original material and data file. This lab material and this video are based on Pete Fader and Bruce Hardy's 2008 note entitled Creating an RFM Summary Using Excel. The webpage link to Fader and Hardy's original document is provided in the lab material, and the data set used in this lab is based on the original data set provided by Fader and Hardy, and the web link to the original data set is also available in the lab material. For this analysis and this demonstration, I already cleaned the data. But if you are interested in the details of how to clean the raw data, there is an appendix at the end of the lab material. So please see the appendix for the details if you are interested. And the raw data file is also available in our course website. Okay, then let's get started. The first step is to compute RFM metrics of each customer from the data. And let's think about what RFM is. Recency indicates the date of the last purchase. If the date of the last purchase is more recent, then the customer's recency score is high. But if not, the customer's recency score is low. And what about the frequency? The frequency is the number of the transactions during a certain time period. So it is just kind of a count of transactions. And what about the monetary value metric? It is the sum all the net spending across all transactions made in a certain time period. So it means that to compute our FM matrix, we need to summarize the customer purchase histories by the date and by the number of transactions and by the sum of net spending. So we can compute our FM matrix through the pivot table. Let's start with frequency because computing frequency is the easiest one. Go to Insert tab and click this pivot table button. Then Excel automatically detects the range of the data and click just the OK button. And now you can see the pivot table. Here we have a space of our pivot table and we have 4 variables here. And we are going to compute the frequency for each individual customer. So place the customer identifier into rows pane. And we have customers like this. And we are going to compute the number of transactions. And the number of transactions can be computed counting the same identifiers during the time period. So let me go back to our original data. The number of transactions in calibration period is 2. We can compute this by counting the same identifier in the calibration period. Customer 6 appears 7 times in the calibration period and 8 times in the validation period. So when we compute the count of the same customer ID for customer 6 in calibration period, we can get 7 and we can get 8 in validation period. So we need to use this ID variable again. So ID variable is put into the values pane as well. And we want to compute the count, not the sum. So click this I button. If you are using Microsoft Windows, there will be a small triangle button instead of this I button. So click this I button and you can replace count for the sum. Then click OK. And now you have the number of transactions for each customer. But we want to compute the count in calibration period and transaction period separately. So place period variable into columns pane and you can get the count of the transactions for each customer and each time period. So for example, the first customer appears twice in the calibration period. It means that this customer made 2 transactions in the calibration period and 1 transaction in validation period. And customer 6 made 7 transactions in calibration period and 8 transactions in validation period. And customer 17 made 10 transactions in calibration period, but only 2 transactions in validation period. So that's the frequency metric. Very easy, right? And I'm gonna change the name of this worksheet as pivot table 1. So double click the name. Then you can change the name of the worksheet. So pivot table 1. And just in case, I'm gonna save this spreadsheet. So then let's move on to the next metric, which is monetary value metric. please go back to the original data sheet, and we're going to make another pivot table for monetary value metric. Just click any non-empty cell and go to Insert tab and click Pivot Table button again. And again, Excel automatically detects the range of the data and click OK button, and you can see another empty pivot table. We are going to compute the monetary value metric for each customer. So first, place ID variable into rows pane. And again, we have the customers here. This time, we're going to compute the sum of spend variable, because the sum of spend variable is the monetary value. So place the spend variable into values pane. And also, we want to compute the monetary value for each time period in calibration period and in validation period separately. So place period variable into columns pane. And now we have the monetary value metric. For example, the first customer spent about $45 during the calibration period and about $26 during the validation period. And customer 6, she spent more than $500 during the calibration period and another $500 during the validation period. And customer 17, she spent about $240 during the calibration period, but only $70 during the validation period. So that's the monetary value metric, and we name the sheet as pivot table 2. And just in case, please save your spreadsheet. The next one is recency metric. So please go back to the original data sheet. And recency metric is a little bit different from the frequency metric and the monetary value metric. High recency score means that the last purchase made by the customer was recent. So we need to get which transaction was the last transaction made by each customer. But the key is that we need to pick the last purchase in the calibration period. We need to exclude the validation period because we want to compute the recency metric based only on the calibration period. For example, for the first customer, the last transaction in the calibration period is the third transaction, not the first transaction. And the recency score should be based on the date of this third transaction. And let's look at the customer 6. She made 7 transactions during the calibration period, and this transaction is the last transaction in the calibration period. So the date of this transaction should be used to compute the recency score of this customer. So to extract the last purchase date in the calibration period by each customer, we're going to use a trick based on the format of this date variable. Here, the format of date variable is year first and month second and date last. So it means that we can numerically compare one date to another date. So this date, January 18th, 1997, which is after this date, January 1st, 1997. So this date is more recent than this date. And you can see that this number is numerically greater than this number. So when we find maximum number of the date variable during the calibration period, we can get the last purchase date in the calibration period. That's what we are going to do to compute the recency metric of each customer. And we can do that through the pivot table. So click any non-empty cell and go to Insert tab and click this pivot table button again. And Excel automatically detects the range of data again and click OK button. And we have another empty pivot table. Again, we are going to compute the metric by each customer. So place ID variable into rows pane. And we have customers here. And we are going to compute the maximum value of date variable. So we need to put the date variable into the values pane. And we want to compute the maximum instead of the sum. So click this I button and replace max for sum. Then click OK. And now we have the maximum value of date variable. But we need to be careful because this is the maximum value of the date in the entire time period. We want to get the maximum value of the date variable only in the calibration period. So we can use filters. Click this period and place it into filters pane, and we can select calibration only. Okay, and just close this pop-up window, and now we have the maximum of the date variable only in the calibration period. And you may find that some of customers do not appear here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, some of customers visited the store only once, and those transactions are classified as the first ever purchase. So those transactions are not included in this pivot table. Just to compute the recency metric, we are going to use those first transactions as well. So click this filter button again and include the first transactions as well. And close the pop-up window. And now you have all of the customers here. And the third customer and fourth customer and fifth customer, they made only one purchase on January 1st, 1997. And that's the maximum value of the date. And that's the last date of the purchase. And their recency score will be evaluated based on those dates. And definitely, this is the very first date of the data set. So definitely, they will have low recency score. So just inclusion of those first transactions may not hurt the quality of the recency scores. And I'm going to rename the worksheet. So I'm going to use pivot table 3 as the name of this worksheet. And just in case, I'm going to save my Excel file. We have computed the recency metric, the frequency metric, and the monetary value metric. And the next step is scoring the customers based on those metrics. To do that, I'm going to make a new worksheet which contains all of the metrics and the scores based on the metrics. I'm going to make a new worksheet by clicking this plus button, and I'm going to name it Summary. And first, I'm going to make a space for the variables in this worksheet. We need ID variable to identify the customers. And we need the space for RFM matrix. So recency, frequency, and monetary value. And next, we need additional variable for the frequency and monetary value in the validation period. Why? Because the frequency in the validation period indicates the actual number of purchases. So we can test if the high recency group, frequency group, and monetary value group actually purchase more. So I'm going to use the name valid.freq for the frequency in the validation period. And I'm going to make valid.spend, which indicates the monetary value during the validation period. This variable indicates the actual net spending during the validation period, so we can test if high recency, frequency, monetary value group actually spent more than low recency, frequency, and monetary value group. Then we need to copy the matrix from the pivot tables. First, let's copy the customer ID from the pivot table 1, which is about the frequency. So here, column A of pivot table 1 contains the customer ID, right? And the table starts at the 5th row. So please memorize this information. Cell A5 in pivot table 1. Okay? And then go back to the summary worksheet and click this A2 cell and type the equality sign and put pivot table 1, which is the name of the worksheet where the pivot table is, and put the exclamation mark and type A5. Then you can see the first customer's ID is copied here. In the same manner, we can copy the first customer's recency metric from pivot table 3. That is in cell B4 in pivot table 3. So please memorize that information and go back to summary worksheet. And in the same manner, we can copy the recency metric. So place the equality sign and type the name of the worksheet where pivot table 3 is and place the exclamation mark and place the cell number B4 and push the enter button. And now you can see the recency metric is successfully copied from pivot table 3. In the same manner, you can copy the frequency metric of the first customer that is in the pivot table 1, and we need to use the frequency metric for the calibration period that is in cell B5. So please memorize that information. Cell B5 in pivot table 1 and go back to summary sheet. Place equality sign and pivot table 1, exclamation mark, and B5. And press enter. And now you can see the first customer's frequency metric is successfully copied here. In the same manner, you can copy the monetary value metric from pivot table 2. Again, cell B5 is the monetary value metric of the first customer in the calibration period. So please memorize B5 of pivot table 2 and go back to the summary sheet and put the equality sign and pivot table 2, exclamation mark, and cell B5 and press enter. Okay. Now we are going to copy frequency metric and monetary value metric in validation period. So do the same thing. Go to the pivot table 1. The D5 is the frequency metric of the first customers in the validation period. So please memorize this information. D5 in pivot table 1 and go back to the summary worksheet and place equality sign pivot table 1, which is the name of the pivot table worksheet, and place exclamation mark and the cell number D5. Okay, and next we can copy the monetary value in validation period for the first customer. So go to pivot table 2, and again D5 is the monetary value metric of the first customer in the validation period. So memorize this information. D5 in pivot table 2. So go back to the summary worksheet and put the equality sign and place the name of the worksheet where the pivot table is. Pivot table, that's pivot table 2, and exclamation mark and D5, which is the monetary value metric in the validation period. And press enter. And now you have the recency metric, frequency metric, and monetary value metric in the calibration period, and frequency metric and monetary value metric again in the validation period. And now we just need to copy these cells into the end of the list of the customers, right? We have 2,357 customers. So first make ID variable for all of those customers. Move your mouse cursor over this small rectangle, then you can see your mouse cursor change it to this black cross, and then press your left mouse button and do not release, and move your mouse down to row 2350A, because the first row of this table is the name of the variable. So we need to go down to row 2350A. Here we go. Now we have all of the customers like this. Then go back to the top of the table. To do that, just click any cell in this column and just press Command and the upward arrow together, or if you are using Microsoft Windows, please press Control and upward arrow button. Then you can instantly come back to the top of the table. And now select the other cells of the first customers and move your mouse cursors over this small rectangle and just double click it. And you can see that all of the metrics are well copied from the pivot tables for the other customers. And let's double check. Just click any cell and then press Command and downward arrow in your keyboard, or if you are using Microsoft Windows, please press Control and downward arrow in your keyboard. And you can instantly go to the bottom of the table and you can see the last row indicates the last customer's recency, frequency, monetary value metrics in calibration period, and the frequency and monetary value metric in the validation period, right? And by pressing Command and upward arrow button or Control and upward arrow button, you can come back to the top of the table instantly. And now we are ready to score each customer. So first, we need to make a space for the recency, frequency, and monetary value score. In column G, we are going to make recency score. So recency code. Because we are going to use reverse coding, so to avoid confusion, I'm going to use the name recency code instead of recency score. And in column H, we are going to make the frequency score. So frequency code. And in column I, we're going to make monetary value score. So monetary dot code. Let me change the width of those columns for exposition. And let's compute the recency code, frequency code, and monetary value code for the first customer. And we are going to use this coding scheme. We are going to divide the customers into only two groups by each metric. So we are going to have two groups by recency metric, high recency group and low recency group. And recency code 1 indicates high recency group, and recency code 2 indicates low recency group. Based on the recency metric, the top 50 customers are included in the high recency group, and the bottom 50 customers are included in the low recency group. So, by the use of this median split strategy, we can divide the customers into high and low recency group. To implement this in Excel, we need to use the median function. The median function returns the middle number in a set of numbers. So, out of the recency metric of all customers, we can find the median number if the first customer's recency metric is greater than that median. This customer is classified as in the high recency group, denoted by recency code 1. If this customer's recency metric is smaller than the median value, this customer's last purchase was made relatively not recently, so this customer is classified as in the low recency group, denoted by recency code 2. So let's implement this strategy. First, we need to put the equality sign, and we're going to use if function as well. And open the parenthesis and type P2, which indicates the cell of the recency metric of the first customer, and put greater than sign and type median function and open another parenthesis and put the range of the recency metric of all customers, which is from cell P2 to cell P2358. And you must put those dollar marks before column number and the row number to fix the range. Like this. And close the parenthesis and put comma 1 and comma 2 and close the parenthesis again. So here, this if function has 3 arguments. The first one is the condition. If this condition is true, then this function returns the value in the second argument, which is 1. But if the condition is false, then this if function returns the value in the third argument. So this function is read as if the first customer's recency metric in cell B2 is greater than the median of the recency metric, the last purchase of this customer made relatively more recently, and this customer is classified as in the high recency group denoted by recency code 1. If not, this customer is classified as in low recency group denoted by recency code 2. And press enter, and you can see that this customer is classified into the high recency group. You can do the same thing for the frequency metric and the monetary value metric. So press equality sign and if, open a parenthesis, and C2 is the cell where the first customer's frequency metric. So put C2, and if C2 is greater than the median of the frequency metrics of all customers, which are in the range from cell C2 to cell C2358, and close the parentheses, and comma 1 and comma 2, and close the parentheses again. And let me interpret this Excel equation. If this customer's frequency metric is greater than the median of the frequency metrics of all customers, it means that if this customer's frequency is relatively high, then this customer is classified in high frequency group denoted by frequency code 1. If not, this customer is classified in low frequency group denoted by frequency code 2. And press enter, and this customer is classified in high frequency group. Let's do the same thing for the monetary value. Press equality sign and type if, open a parenthesis, and cell D2 is the cell where the first customer's monetary value metric is. So place D2 and put the greater than sign and type median, open another parenthesis, and place the range of the monetary value metric of all customers, that is from D2 to D2358, and close the parentheses, and comma 1 and comma 2, and close the parentheses again. And let me interpret Excel equation. If this customer's monetary value metric is greater than the median, it means if this customer's monetary value metric is relatively high, then this customer is assigned into the high monetary value group denoted by monetary value code 1. If not, this customer is classified into the low monetary value group denoted by monetary value code 2. And press enter. Then you can get the first customer's monetary value code. And the remaining job is to copy the Excel equations for the first customer to the other customers. So select the cells of the first customer's recency, frequency, and monetary value codes, and move your mouse cursor over this small rectangle, and then double click it. And you can see the other customers' recency, frequency, and monetary value codes are successfully computed. And for confirmation, press Command and download arrow or control and download arrow if I'm using Microsoft Windows, then you can find the last customer's recency, frequency, and the monetary value code are well computed. And by pressing Command and upward arrow button, you can instantly come back to the top of the table. And please save your worksheet. And we are almost done. We classify the customers by recency, frequency, and monetary value metrics. The remaining job is to validate this classification method using a holdout validation. We have the frequency and the monetary value during the validation period for each customer. And for example, the first customer, she is classified into the high recency group, high frequency group, and high monetary value group. Then definitely this customer is expected to purchase more and spend more than the other customers. If this classification is accurate, then this customer's actual frequency and monetary value during the validation period should be relatively high. To do that, we are going to compute the average of frequency and monetary value in the validation period for each group of customers. The average frequency and the average monetary value in validation period for the high recency group should be higher than the low recency group if this recency metric is valid for the customer classification. In the same manner, if the frequency metric is valid, then the average of frequency and monetary value in the validation period of high frequency group should be higher than those of low frequency group. And we can compute the averages by the use of pivot table again. So, click any non-empty cell in this worksheet and go to Insert tab and click Pivot Table button again. And then Microsoft Excel automatically detects the range of the data and click OK button and place the recency code variable into rows pane, which is the variable classifies the customers by recency, and place valid frequency and valid spend into values pane. And then click this I button to change the summary of the variables. I'm going to choose average. Okay. And for the next variable, change the summary. So click this average and click OK button. Now you can see the average value of the frequency and monetary value in the validation period for each group. So this one indicates high recency group and these two indicate low recency group. And you can see that the high recency group's average frequency in the validation period is 1.36, and the average of the monetary value in the validation period is 51.3. They are greater than the low recency group's average frequency and average monetary value in the validation period. So this result confirms that recency metric successfully classifies the customers into two different groups in terms of prediction of the customer profitability. And you can repeat this for the frequency metric and the monetary value metric. So I'm going to go back to the summary sheet and make another pivot table. And place frequency code into rows pane and place valid frequency and valid span into values pane and change the summary from sum to average for both variable. And now you can have the result. This indicates high frequency group. This indicates low frequency group. And as you can see, high frequency group shows higher frequency and monetary value in the validation period. And do the same thing for the monetary value metric. So make a pivot table again. Place monetary code variable into rows and place valid frequency and valid spend variables into values pane and change the summary from sum to average for both variables. And now you can see the same result. As mentioned in the lecture video, in this data set, frequency and monetary value are perfectly correlated. So you can see exactly the same numbers as in the result of the frequency metric table. And then, now let's investigate which metric is more critical than the others. We need to put all of the recency, frequency, and monetary value scores into one pivot table. To do that, let's make another pivot table and put all of the code variables into rows. Recency code, frequency code, and monetary value code. And here, you can see a tree-like structure in this column. It is a little bit tricky to understand, but not that difficult. So just let me explain how to interpret this tree. There are three different levels. The first level with no indentation. And the second level, there is only one indentation. And for the third level, there is indentation twice. So the first level stands for the first variable in this list, that is recency code. And the second level stands for the second variable in this list, that is frequency code. And the third level is associated with the third variable in the list, that is monetary code. So this 1, 1, 1 means recency code 1, frequency code 1, and monetary code 1. That is a group of high recency, high frequency, and high monetary value. And what about this 1, 2, 2? This group indicates high recency but low frequency and low monetary value. This 2, 1, 1 indicates low recency but high frequency and high monetary value. And this 2, 2, 2 indicates low recency, low frequency, and low monetary value. So we have 4 different types of customers. Because the frequency and the monetary value metrics are perfectly correlated to each other, that's why we have only 4 types. But if they are not perfectly correlated to each other, you may have 8 different types. And then, for each type, we just need to compute the average of frequency and monetary value in the validation period. To do that, just repeat the same thing. Place the valid frequency variable and valid spend variable into the values pane and change the summary from sum to average for both variables. And now you have the result. We just need to look at these 4 rows. This row indicates the average frequency and monetary value in the validation period of the group of high recency and high frequency and high monetary values. And the second row shows the average frequency and monetary value in the validation period of the group of high recency but low frequency and low monetary value. In the same manner, you can interpret those numbers. You may find that low recency but high frequency and high monetary value group shows higher frequency and monetary value in validation period than the group of high recency but low frequency and low monetary value. So it means that frequency would be more critical than recency for this data set. Alright, that's all I have in this lab demonstration. And I strongly believe that you can correctly answer all of the questions in the lab material.